Welcome back to DA's Administration 1, FR100. My name is David, and I will be your instructor for this learning module. In the previous module on identity providers, you learned how to configure user authentication. In this module, you will learn about authorization, also known as role-based access control or RBAC. I will cover several of the more commonly used administrator and user roles and discuss some best practices. The assignment of roles is available at different layers within the object hierarchy. Where and how you configure permissions will determine the point of access and the availability of features a user or administrator receives. To illustrate this concept, take a look at the diagram on this slide. Customer 1 has three organizations: Engineering, Client 1, and Client N. The engineering organization has a single account or desktop pool running in Azure. Client 1 has two on-premise pools, and Client N has a single pool running in AWS. A user with the customer administrator role will have permissions to see all of these organizations and pools. Moving down a level, an organization administrator will have the ability to see only the resources of that particular organization. Client 1's org admins can only see the two on-premise pools with no visibility into Client N or engineering. Similarly, Client N can only see the pool in AWS. Lastly, account administrator roles can only manage the pools assigned to them, but do not have access to the rest of the organization or the customer-level objects. Let's explore these roles in more detail. The customer administrator role is a super administrator with the highest level of access across the entire hierarchy. When granted this role, the administrator has permissions to add, modify, and delete cloud accounts, configure identity providers, create and manage multiple organizations, access all frame accounts or desktop pools. They can also assign and modify permissions for any of the other roles. You should be careful when handing out this level of authorization to only those administrators within your organization who need it. Organization administrator is a role that is limited to the scope of the organization in which they are assigned. When granted this role, the administrator has permissions to access the organization level, add, modify, and delete cloud accounts that will be available to only this organization, create and manage multiple accounts or desktop pools under this organization, and assign and manage users to this organization or underlying accounts. The role of account administrator is limited to tasks within the scope of an individual frame account or desktop pool. When granted this role, the administrator has permissions to install apps in the sandbox, set capacity and publish, define launchpads and session settings, and manage users on the account. While not discussed further, there is an additional role of sandbox administrator, which is limited to only managing and publishing the sandbox image. You can refer to the product documentation for a list of additional roles and associated permissions. So far, I have only discussed roles that will have access to the administrative control panel. End users do not need this level of access and will need to be granted permission to access their desktop session. This is accomplished by assigning them to the Launchpad user role. This will permit them access to authorized applications and/or desktop launchpads. They can also switch between launchpads if they have been authorized to more than one. Here are a few best practices when planning your access policies. Keep in mind, the needs of your company or use case may vary, and these are only recommendations based on a typical customer deployment. First, configure SAML2 IDP definition at the customer entity level. This will ensure that your users and groups are available to all sub-organizations and accounts within the entire customer hierarchy. Second, assign permissions at the customer entity level by default. This may sound counterintuitive, but you can make granular assignments to organizations and accounts at the customer level. This makes it easier to find all of your permissions from a single point in the hierarchy, reducing troubleshooting and maintenance over time. Third, pass a group or member of attribute for each authentication request to minimize the number of permissions. Using groups is also easier to maintain compared to assigning individual users to objects. Let's review what you learned. Administrator and user roles define what capabilities and access to resources an authenticated user is granted. Roles may be assigned at different levels within the object hierarchy. For ease of administration, most companies will want to assign and manage roles at the customer level when using a SAML2 IDP. This concludes the lesson module. Be sure to check out the other videos in the series that make up the full course. Thanks so much for watching.